how to prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, that is very important. And, one of those tough lessons learned. It's so easy to read about. It's easy to give that advice to others. I'm actually very good about it, I think, in supervising my team. And like many women, can come last when it comes to doing it myself. But I have gotten stricter about that. And this is directly connected to our topic today because this is about setting boundaries, right? And you have to be kind of assertive to set boundaries. And it requires some unlearning and undoing. There's so much socialization, especially for women, to engage in incredible self-sacrifice, taking care of others. So I was reading about all of this. I believed in all of this, but again, it was difficult for me. So I would say, I'm in my mid 40s at this point. I didn't really learn how to do this for myself very well. And it's been in the past 10 years. But at that point I was very, very burnt out. And so it was like something has to change, right? I learned it the hard way, like many of us learned many things, but it just was about like prioritization. I got really good at managing my Outlook calendar, really strict about my preferences too, because I had been like, we'll do all of the work. We'll squeeze as much work into every day, move things around, really focused on productivity. And then the shift, you do have to just shift and say like, no, it's going to be about self-care that is actually going to make me more productive in the long run. I'm going to be better at the job, whatever the job is, the jobs I want to do, the jobs I don't want to do. You're going to be better, more thoughtful, compassionate, strategic, assertive when you need to be, when you are in a better, healthier space. And so for me, the main tool to just be very practical about it was I'm going to control my Outlook calendar and hold firm on making sure I eat lunch. I'm not really a morning person. So I try not to have meetings with humans before like 10 a.m. because I just won't be as engaged fully in that meeting either. So I found like that's not actually a good use of my time because I don't care as much as I might need to. And then holding some time at the end of the day to kind of decompress and do, case management, things like the details that required less interaction with people, because I'm actually an introvert too, which if people see me speak a lot, which I really enjoy doing, sometimes they don't believe, but it's about figuring out who you are and harnessing that energy and guarding it sometimes so that you can, for me, it feels like I burst out and do it the next day, come in retreat, do that, really retreat and recover on the weekends and maintain some sort of balance so that I can keep doing it and doing it well on a long-term basis.
Yeah. So many good things in there. And you saw me laughing at one point because I'm not a morning person either. And I'm very strategic about when I do my first recordings per se and how I'm going to, because I need to be up, I need to have had my coffee. I need to have done my journaling and checked my emails and done all those things before I go into recording for me to feel ready for the day. And so I know I don't want to get up before 7 a.m. I just don't want to do it. I had to do it for years when I was in an office before I was working for myself. I had the 5 to 5:30 wake up for 20, 25 years. I grinded it out and I did it, but I hated it. So I left. So it's like, but it was one of those things. I was a mom. I had a job. We had to get the kids out the door. So I built things within that to make it workable. But I'm so glad you brought that up about controlling your calendar, setting boundaries in it. And also, if we're going to show up as our best selves, being clear-minded, how much more better? I don't know if that's the right term, but you show up for other people and being that clear-minded, having those ideas, being strategic. It's very difficult to be strategic if something gets thrown at you that you need to strategize and work through. If you don't have the capacity for it. And I think that's where we get stuck. We don't realize I have no capacity. Are you taking care of yourself? Because we've been sold this lie that it's selfish to stop and take care of ourselves and put ourselves first, whatever that looks like. But actually, it's the joke, and I've said this 1,000 times, but it's true. The joke's on everybody else and on ourselves because we cannot show up as our best selves if we haven't first taken care of ourselves and have the capacity. So I'm so glad you spoke to that. And one, we're worthy of it. And two, we're better in everything else we show up in. I mean, there's just such a trickle down effect to that. So I'm so glad you spoke to that. And I think that knowing your calendar and putting boundaries within it, because you meant, we'll get into boundaries next, but it requires some assertiveness, some discipline, and knowing what it is, and then continuing. Sometimes you got to communicate that a few times. So let's go right into boundaries. Talk to me about your boundaries journey, because I think this is a very necessary one for women, but it's difficult as well, especially if they're used to you showing up one way and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, that is not working for me or anybody anymore. But some people don't want to hear that. They like how you're showing up for them. So talk to me about your boundaries journey.
Yes. I mean, that's a great point, is if you today are starting and saying, I'm going to be more assertive, or I'm going to tackle this issue in my relationships, you do have to be prepared for people to be surprised that you're showing up differently. But it's never too late to start. So I, many years ago, was very shy. I didn't want to be, right? There was this, I'm now like my authentic self on a regular basis, but I was afraid to show up that way. I was raised by kind of strict parents, and it was the children should be seen and not heard. And I have a sister, and girls were definitely supposed to be well behaved and pleasant, politely smile, not cause too much of a disturbance. So I was raised to be that kind of young woman. Now, like many young women, you then find yourselves in like young adulthood or adolescence, young adulthood, you name it, where you need to be assertive and assert your boundaries because people might be trying to take advantage of those in a variety of ways. I mean, we can talk about harmful ways and sexual harassment and sexual assault, but it could just be trying to take advantage of your polite demeanor in a meeting so that they always get their own way. It could be in your romantic relationships, and you might really love the person, but they are really kind of exploiting the giving nature and not giving it back. So we see this all across the ends of the spectrum, right? And I would say also I had to learn the hard way. I was getting really mad. So I would find myself experiencing sexism, although I'm not sure I knew that's what it was then. So like when I was younger, high school, undergrad, during my college years, I was kind of like girl power framework for this. Now I have become much more explicitly and academically feminist and unapologetically so, but then I was like trying to, figuring out why I was living this experience, feeling this way, encountering these challenges and boundaries. In the classroom, men dominated the discussion. I was a political science major, so that at that time was still male dominated. And I like to sit back and take up a lot of room, and now they would share in class so much more than I did. I noticed a couple of things. And this wasn't like egregious behavior, but I noticed that they would sit back and they weren't prepared. And this didn't stop them from participating in class discussion at all. They'd say things, I'd think, well, that wasn't really that profound. I'd be sitting there waiting for the really clever thing or the exact right answer before raising my hand and politely waiting to be called on and participating. I'd get this feedback from my professors who would be like, great job. I mean, I loved getting a good grade and I really took my assignment seriously, but I didn't want to go to office hours because that required human interaction with an older authority figure I didn't know. I didn't want to participate in class because what if I was wrong? I thought I'd feel mortified. And, what if I was wrong? What if I made a mistake? It would be the end of the world. But I was watching these men and I'm like, they don't care. 2, they're not always right. 3, it's not that great of a contribution. And so that would be low level stuff, but professors would be like, please participate more in class. And I was like, but again, the people pleasing I wanted to, but then I began doing that. That's one lane, right? Where I was like, okay. And you're going to have to participate more. I figured out and I survived it. One, I was like, it was a good thing to say. I actually knew what I was talking about. You survived the awkward moment. So putting those little things together. Now, as a young woman who really hadn't been allowed to date and then was allowed to date, I had to figure out really early on how to set boundaries because there were always people willing to try to take advantage of those.
Yeah.
Now, I think I've landed in this line of work because I was in a family dynamic where anger was allowed, though, right? Not always in healthy ways, but it was. So then when I had someone who'd put their hand, like who was making a move too fast, I didn't have a bunch of things in the way from me saying, whoa, no, we're not going to do that. You don't get to do that. So now I didn't know that was unusual. I was just living my own experience at the time, right? But anger was allowed, which can be very, very useful. Like we're afraid of anger. I want to come back to that later. I will probably because I'm just so passionate about this.
Yes.
But I was figuring that out, and I was really mad though, because I was mad that I was being sexualized in moments where I was trying to be taken seriously and not being engaging sexually when we want to. And in the right setting, in the right relationship, that's fine. But not when I'm going to get gas or going to the grocery store, or in class. And so I was getting angrier about my experience of the world as a woman and had to figure out what to do with that. So I took a class on persuasion in undergrad, and it was just an elective. I just thought that would be interesting. I knew I was going to law school, so I think I was thinking of my legal writing. But it connected all of these dots for me and has really been something I learned that I haven't let go of, right? And this is something I talk about with my younger employees too, because I lead an office that does sexual assault and harassment prevention and supervises victim advocates. The victim advocates have chosen the work, right? So, and they're passionate about it, and it's heartbreaking work sometimes. And where I am helping them learn to communicate about the work we do really always comes back to this, where they're emotional about it, and rightfully so. Totally valid emotions.
Absolutely.
But there's a difference sometimes between being right and being effective. And that's what we keep coming back to. And this is what clicked for me in that class that really put me on the kind of the learning journey about assertiveness, which is I want to be effective, right? I'm right. I'm against sexual harassment. That's what I tell them. I'm like, of course we're right. We're the anti-sexual harassment and sexual assault people. We're right. We're right when we walk into the room. But we still have to accomplish what we want in this meeting. And everyone doesn't prioritize this the way we do or believe about the changes we want to make the way we do. So how are we going to communicate that? So persuasion and comfort with anger and boundaries and assertiveness. These are the things that I'm thinking about every day and have really learned how to put in practice, which is, I think, the whole key to how I've become successful in what it is that I do. But it also is the key to having the life that I want and the relationships that I want and the self-care that I need, is my use of the combination of those things. And so that's where the pandemic, the closure actually gave me time to write my book on this. But this is where I was able to put this all together because I was having these conversations over and over with younger women that work where I work, or I'm on a college campus, or either in class or come talk to me. They were coming to talk to me about a bunch of things, thankfully, that weren't directly connected to the job, but were around their need to be assertive in certain moments or situations, and really not knowing how to do that because we're almost never taught how to do that.
No.
We all are learning it ourselves the hard way as we go. And I thought there has to be a better way.
Yes, absolutely. I love what you said. So many great things there. And I think something that's really important is that persuasion piece and knowing how to communicate in the moment to like, okay, this is where we're coming in at. So let's be strategic about this. And I love what you said about anger gets a bad rap. Anger itself is a clue. It's letting you know something needs to be addressed. It is an alert. It is there for you. Now, what you do with that anger, that's the problem sometimes.
Yes.
But anger within itself is necessary. It's important. It's an informer, and it can be a powerful tool for the things that you go after, the things that you care about. It lets you know what it is that you are passionate about, lets you know what it is that you want to see be fixed, be better, change. So I love that you talked about that, because especially as women, as little girls, we are told not anger is not attractive and anger is not allowed and it's not okay to be angry. And then you're a grown up. So you've heard this narrative your whole life. And then all of a sudden, as a grown up, you're like, wait a minute. And you have to learn how to navigate it in a different way, because you have never been given permission to feel it at all. So that can get messy, because you're like, okay, what do I do with this thing? And I know that's my journey is like, wait a minute. This is a clue. This is an informer. The things that I'm angry about are the things that I want to work on to be better, to change. And I can use that. That can be a really powerful tool. And so I love so much that you address that, because I think that's so important. And also within the boundaries framework, that communication and understanding what it is, like, that's not okay. And it doesn't matter what you've been told as the other person, or like, this is not okay for me. So I need to have a reset, and I need to have this in place, and communicating those things effectively. So many good things there, but the strategic part of like understanding the audience and who is you're talking to, and how to go into that well and use these tools effectively, of persuasion, of like, and it's not about it. You have to let go of that. Obviously we're right, but how do we get, this is not about us being right. This is not the conversation. This is about bringing them over to our viewpoint and helping them to see why it is. Because especially if you're talking to a room full, I'm just going to say it, a room full of white cisgendered men, that's not their experience in this country. For better or for worse, it's not and it's not entirely their faults. That's how the culture is, designed. Right. And within that, as a collective, it's, it's their responsibility to recognize and be like, wait a minute, because as a power broker, they have more power to make change. But at the end of the day, just cutting all that out, you're going to have to bring them into your experience.
Right.
And so, I could talk about this all day, you could see, but I love that you talked about that, because we don't talk about it enough.
It's, when I speak to audiences, there's always some laughter, because I say it's my go-to emotion. I say,
right.
I'm comfortable with anger. I say, reclaim your anger. I say, raise angry girls. And everybody's kind of like, and they love it as a pep talk, right? But it's so hard to take the message back and put it into practice.
Right.
Because they feel inspired when we talk about that. And they do feel validated, because we're rarely validated. Our anger is rarely validated, except when we have like if I have happy hour with my friends, or we have, the book club where we don't actually talk about the book. What are we talking about? We're like venting our frustrations, because that anger needs a place to come up safely.
Yes.
And how you use it really matters. It does, right? Because if I just show up angry at work all of the time, and I think my anger is valid. I am the anti-sexual harassment lady. There's too much sexual harassment. But if I show up angry at work all of the time, what's going to happen? People are not going to want to work with me. They're not going to hear my message. They're not going to invite me to calls and meetings. They're going to avoid me and my team, and will be siloed. Now, we would continue taking care of people who've been harmed, but that's really going to interfere with our ability to create change, which is what we want. And, I'm glad you mentioned the older white cisgender men. I do talk to them a lot. They're in many of my audiences, and they have not had the experiences. We would like for them to take the responsibility to learn on their own and educate themselves. There are plenty of days where I'm frustrated, where I'm like, why do I have to have this conversation again? But they don't know. And very few people are making them spend time on these things. And some of us are going to have to carry this as a passion project. The world shouldn't be that way, but it is. So I know when I go in there that they're already like, now we have to have a sexual, harassment presentation today. So I actually try to disarm them at first and then be firm later when I need to. Because I do get, I think, some ridiculous questions, but it reveals how privileged and sheltered and ignorant they are on the topic. Because I mean, I've gotten questions where it's like, how could there be sexism in the classroom? What would that look like? And they're really like, how could that exist? So thankfully, generationally, we've made way more progress on those understandings. But who are in positions of power? Who are making decisions? Who are dominating discussions? Who is setting the agenda? I still have to work with those people, whether I find them frustrating, and informed or not, if you want to be effective. But it's not just to work, because sometimes it's like your relationship with your mother-in-law, right? I mean, you're still like, maybe it's just the family. You're navigating the holidays. And you're like, oh no. Or, because different families have different dynamics. And you're like, you're going to have to see that uncle who, you disagree with. And so now the strategy might be self-care and avoidance. That's fine. But if it's to engage on a topic, right, again, even in those moments, you want to be strategic and persuasive and assertive or not. But we don't want to be aggressive unnecessarily, right? Most of the time we don't want to be aggressive. It's not effective. I'm not saying never, but like, we don't want to be passive or passive aggressive. That doesn't get us where we want to go. But aggression is not how we want to engage. It's not how we want to be treated either, right? So where we're trying to land most of the time for all the right reasons is assertive.
Yeah. And aggression tends to knock down the conversation before you get started. And you're not going to move anything there. Because I think that something else that's really important is you see the anger, you want to make a difference in it. Then you've got to get /accept the fact that you're going to continually walk into spaces where you're going to have to do the same things over and over again. And you've got to get okay with that and not allow that to continue to anger you. Accept that on the front side so that you can be effective in moving the needle and making the changes. Would you say that's a proper assessment of that?
Yeah, I do. And that's tough. And it's really tough when you're younger.
Yes.
For any listeners out there who might be into the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 8. And that's sometimes described as the challenger. I mean, I talked to a group of moms, and they thought this was so funny because I jokingly apologizing. I was like, if you have an Enneagram 8 child, I promise you it gets better. I promise.
We can channel that.
Right. I was like, well, you got to figure out how to channel it, right? Because otherwise they're just like testing and kind of angry and angsty because they want to be free, right? Like you want to be free to be yourself. And so that's hard when you're, a child or a teenager. But I was like, but look what they can become. They can become a champion for a cause, and they can use this way of showing up in the world for good. But I've learned, that sometimes it is slow and steady wins the race. And that's the persistence, that's the relentlessness that I sometimes bring, which is I'm just not going to let this go. I'm just not going to let my priority get pushed off the agenda. Now, maybe in one meeting, yes, but over time. And I've learned to take the wins because I like quick decisions, quick meetings, I like to keep it moving. But what's really satisfying is the thing that it took you 5 years to accomplish when it finally gets done. That's where I was like, oh, this feels deeply satisfying in another way. And so that can be the way you do it too. But again, aggression would shut you out. Aggression would be a no, we're not doing it. And it would be no because they don't like me. It wouldn't be no because it's not worth doing. And so that's where you can get in your own way. And please hear me. I think a lot of the feelings are valid, right? But you got to find the way to vent them in the safe space or in the low impact space. It's not going to deter your strategy. And then channel that energy. So anger does give me a lot of energy where I'm like, okay, then I'm just going to be more strategic. Then I'm just going to, and then I do sometimes stop back to my office and frustrated. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had to explain this again. But I vent that to the other people. And I'm like, not going to let them rattle me where I get angry, where they're going to then label me the angry woman who, of course, wants to go too far. And then not accomplish what I want. So the key to living the life I want and being successful in my field and having healthy relationships, it all comes back to the same practice. I think it's a daily practice of assertiveness. So what I want people to know is you can't just save it for every 3 to 5 years when you want a promotion or you're, interviewing for a new job. I'll help you cram, the night before if you need the salary negotiation sentence that you need to say, but that's never going to be as effective as if you practice this and hone the skill, and then you can flex that muscle, because also then you can hold firm and sit in silence and not undo what you've asked for in the moment, which is often the hardest part when this feels so unfamiliar.
Yeah, absolutely. So much good there. So much good. I'm going to ask a question later because it goes well with another talking point about, I'm going to have you talk about, so hold some of those thoughts, the difference between assertiveness and aggression, because I think we don't understand that. But right now, because you talked about venting, releasing anger, whatnot, taking care of your emotional health as much as your physical health, because again, you're in these spaces that can be frustrating, and we all know the body keeps the score. You got to find ways to release it, safe places. So talk to me about your emotional health, physical health journey and how you deal with that.
I mean, that's been really difficult, right? Because so crying wasn't really allowed or rewarded, but anger was, right? And so this is an unhealthy family dynamic. I don't necessarily recommend this. I mean, I like the full, let your children express a range of emotions would be my advice.
Not just, let's not hone in on one.
Right. Not just one. But I have found a job, I think, where I'm like, oh, I can take that and harness it and, hopefully direct that energy in a good way so I don't self-sabotage other parts of my life, right? Because of the way I grew up. But the body does keep the score. Great book. Read it, audiobook. I mean, just so many lessons in that.
Yeah.
And I am not taking care of myself. I, get tighter and the shoulders get up and I'm clenched. And, I used to think massages were kind of frivolous. I mean, wonderful, but not important. And again, with the boundaries, I would say 8 years ago, I was really stressed, burnout, lost a lot of weight, looked older, was probably dehydrated, probably all the things, it just was just total work burnout.
Yeah.
And this is going to be hard for women because it's hard to budget for yourself too, sometimes based on how you've, been socialized to take care of others. Again, this will help you take care of others. So I have reframed for myself massages as medical care, as health care. And actually, a lot of your HSA or F, check in what's allowed. You can probably pay for it because it is we've just have these old outdated notions of what going to the doctor is. You don't want to just go to the doctor when you're really sick and you have no other choice, right? It's think of it that way. This is keeping me from being in the hospital.
Right.
This is
working out that tension, getting out of my body, no high blood pressure, no racing heartbeat, all those things.
I can sleep. I'm nicer, I can sit longer, I guess, if I need to be working on something. So, I mean, that's been crucially important. The happy hours with my friends, my work friends, and they're my real friends too, but that kind of commiseration in an appropriate space is actually very important for me. I've learned to value that as well. It used to be oh, I don't have time, or we'd all cancel on each other. And then, I do think you learn that when you get older is no one person. So if you have a romantic partner, they cannot take care of your whole set of needs and wants, right? And so people serve different functions in your life. Practices serve different functions in your life. Working out, whatever that is. I don't actually enjoy working out. It's funny because people are like, I think you like kickboxing. And I'm like, I probably would, but
I'm not going to be.
Yeah, I know. They're like, have you tried? But I don't want to go, but as an introvert, I'm not looking for another group activity, right?
Yeah,
so you've got to find the movement that you will do that feels good to you, that's restorative. So I believe in all of the things, but it comes back to, you know what you need to be doing. You've got to prioritize it and set boundaries around it. There are really, good memes, but for that are educational out there. I saw one recently that made me think of many of my friends in heterosexual marriages where the husbands go play golf for 5 or 6 hours on the weekend. Where's your 5 or 6 hour retreat on a regular basis, moms? You deserve it. You deserve it, right? And your relationship is not fair, is not balanced, is not egalitarian if that is laughable to you, right? So it's just a meme I saw on Instagram in passing, but I was like, boy, that just captures
way
a lot.
Too much truth to that. And not everybody, unfortunately. I laugh because my husband is one of those people, but also I'm blessed because he was always like, go take your time. He was mindful of the fact that was his time and I needed to get my time too and figure out what that was. And we worked that out over the years because at first I was like, wait a minute. He goes, I'm not telling you can't go take your time. Go take your time. But I had grown up in a space where that wasn't the case. And so then I was like, oh, I'm not doing this again. He goes, you don't have to. Go take your time. I'm not telling you not to go take your time.
That's a great example because sometimes from a lot of the passive aggressiveness, that's often the go-to strategy for many women, right? Because that feels a comfortable way to navigate that. Now, sometimes there's truth into what we're holding on to. It's I'm mad because he disappears for 5 hours, and sometimes they think they're entitled to that, right? That's how they've grown up. They do think they deserve it. They don't know what the issue is. These are, I would say, the same men who say they babysit their children, where I'm like, it's not babysitting. If it's your own children.
Child, yes. One of my kids, you can't be babysitting those that belong to you.
Correct. So there's more work to do there. Yeah. But sometimes we just haven't asked or said. And so that's where you can't be passive aggressive as a strategy and be successful. It just harms yourself because that's where we're sitting back and we're mad about something. And again, I think the feelings might be valid. No one is disputing the feelings here, but you're expecting someone else to read your mind and know how you feel about it and feel the same way you do from your perspective when they're in their own body, having their own day, living their own, frustrations, realities, feelings, whatever. And they're probably not looking at you thinking, you don't deserve your own time, right? Exactly. So we're just projecting all of this. And the solution here is assertive communication, where it's I'm not going to hold on to these feelings for, 3 days, 3 weeks, 20 years, whatever it is. What does that do? That increases your frustration, your anxiety. You're spending all this time chewing on it. You have insomnia. It turns into resentment because that is some unexpressed anger, frustration, those things, where if we engaged assertively, you might discover, right? I love this conversation that you had with yours, that he's like, you can take your time, It's going to be really hard if they don't think you deserve your time. That's going to be a tough journey.
A different conversation, and that's a whole other relationship avenue that you need to take on.
It's worth having, but that's one of those things where they're probably not ready for you to show up asserting your boundaries, and it will take more time. But as a 46-year-old woman, I can tell you that and since I've been doing this for a while, it's well worth it. It is possible to change your relationship, create change, in that dynamic with your partner. It just will be an investment.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I'm 54 and I can say the same thing. It's so true. So I'm so glad we talked about that because again, going back, it will show up in other ways. It's going to come out explosively in a place that makes no sense to them. And you're not going to get anywhere because you won't necessarily, it might take you time to sit in it and even realize where it came from because you've sat on it all these years. So,
it can get in the way of, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it can get in the way of affection or a healthy sex life because you are mad about the recycling bins,
Yes.
And I'm like, So again, it's probably frustrating, but what do you want? You want a healthy relationship. You want your partner to see you. You want them to understand where you're coming from. There's no way to get there without communication. There's just isn't.
Yeah. And being assertive and not being afraid and knowing that you get to be heard and your feelings are valid. Absolutely. Oh, good stuff. Right. There's so much good stuff. Your work really defines this really well, but so how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. We apologize for being unapologetic.
I know.
And I feel like that if you can live unapologetically, assertiveness isn't going to feel difficult for you because you are you're comfortable in that. You feel validated in that. You understand what it means. So and you talked about this earlier. I think it's really interesting too. You talked about being an introvert. I think there is a misunderstanding that only extroverts can be assertive and only extroverts have. That is untrue. The most assertive person about their boundaries in our family is my youngest, who is our introvert. She is, boom, this is what I'll tolerate. This is what I won't. These are my people. I mean, she has it down. Because you talked about earlier, the importance of self-care within that. I'm knowing she finds times to reload and regenerate on her own in her alone time. And then she comes out and she's ready to roll in those places. So I think it's really important too. This unapologetic piece has nothing to do with being an introvert, extrovert, ambivert, however it is. It's about believing and being confident in that space of living and then showing up and whatever assertiveness looks like for you, because it doesn't look the same for everybody. So anyway, I've said a lot there, but talk to me about that.
No. Well, if Western culture, right? So if you think of like capitalist cultures, American culture rewards extroversion. I think it over rewards it. So your most introverted child probably did have to learn early on to establish those boundaries, right? And those boundaries are crucially important because of the energy depletion. I have
yes, so true.
My best friend is a true extrovert, like woo on the Strengths Finder assessment too, where I'm like, I'm no woo. And then she's like, yes, you do. And I'm like, it's not woo. It's other things that are masking as like the woo, ability. But, we just had to figure that out where it's like, I don't do brunch. People love brunch. I'm not against the food or the mimosa, you know what I mean? The concept of brunch, I get it. But like at the end of my week to do a brunch on the Saturday is too disruptive in my day. And then so I honestly have this like friend rule where they love me and I hang out with them at other times, but like I'm not joining them for brunch. It has to be somebody's like 50th birthday or something. And that is fine. And you're like, this is fine. That you just have to set the boundary.
Yeah.
And everybody laughs and
you don't have to apologize for it.
No, there's things they don't like to do. There's all kinds of like restaurants she doesn't like to go to. Our relationship balances itself out, right? Where it's like she, we cater to those quirks or needs, and that's fine. But we had to communicate those. We really did. Introversion is a gift. I mean, our introverts in the workplace are accomplishing so much. The introverts in our families actually might be the one who's sitting back while there's a discussion that could easily be going off the rails, who then says the thing. So they're great like mediators and conflict resolution. It's like they're great listeners. They're people we desperately need. Susan Cain has a great book. It's not new, but Quiet, The Power of Introverts. I mean, that one was just really helped me reclaim it too, because I've been trying to perform as an extrovert in more ways. And now I just, unapologetically am the and kind of grumpily. Sometimes I'm like, had enough of this party. See y'all later. Just smile and wave and be like, have a good day, from afar in the back of the room. And then let myself go. But if you're showing up consistently, you're going to find out your relationships have so much room for that. Room for you to engage in that self-care. We do apologize for everything, women in particular. And that's a great place to start too, and you can do this with a buddy. It's probably easier to do this with a friend if you're starting an assertiveness journey, but you can do this by yourself. You can do this on your assertiveness journey. Having a buddy, that would be great, is kind of keeping track every time you say sorry. And you can, just do this over like a 2-hour period of hanging out. You're going to be astonished. It's just so many apologies for everything all the time.
I like what you said about the accountability buddy. My husband and I did this practice a few years ago when I was talking through, I'm like, and I knew that I said sorry too much. Like I knew it was something. And so we started a practice of where he was just like, it was just he and I, or talking to somebody else and he heard it. If he was in earshot, he's like, take that back right now. Take that back. Why are you apologizing? And it was powerful because it made me stop and think about what I was apologizing. And then he made me reframe it. Like he's like, now reframe that. And it has made a huge difference. My sorries have gone way down. They're not gone. It takes, I didn't really start working on this until I was, 51, 52. I've had 51 years to practice in one way. Right. But it is when you stop and find that person to exchange that with, and that's also empowering. And I think when we live unapologetically, we put these practices into place, people see it in us and it invites them into it. It gives permission for more of us to be that way. I think that's so important. And you mentioned earlier, getting together with your girlfriends from work because you understood each other. You're giving yourself safe places to be sounding boards with people that hear you, understand you, and you're not apologizing for it. I think that's another example of unapologetic living. It also takes the pressure off those other relationships because you made such a good point. That's a lot of pressure on your relationship if you've got to come home to your spouse or partner or whatever that your dynamic is and unload every night. That takes that's just energy that is, and they may not understand. And sometimes you don't need feedback. You just want to be heard by someone who understands you. So I think that was a great example too of the power of that. And just seeing that modeled invites other people into it. And that's what we want to do. We want to be, empowered, and we want other people to be drawn to it so they can be part of that too. That's how we change narratives and stigmas. And I think we have to understand that we do this better together. There's this terrible scarcity mindset of women got to knock other women down so they can get to the top.
Right.
And it's like, we got to rise up together. If you being one woman in a room of 11 men it's going to be really hard. That's going to be a temporary fix. But if you really want to make change, you got to bring everybody with you and show our collective power together. That's how and it's by being assertive, and being able to do that as a collective and seeing the power in that. I think that's just
that I think is the key. And that is actually what I think was missing from prior books on assertiveness and assertiveness training workshops. And it's interesting because there's been trends, right? So women's movement, we get the first, one of the foundational books, which I really enjoy, which is still very, very good. Some of the examples are dated, but still very good, is The Assertive Woman.
Yeah.
Came out the 1972 or something, maybe 76. Became a bestseller. People were reading it during the women's movement. But then that died down. And we do experience periods of backlash. But then the early 90s, we have another resurgence where this is really tied to the Supreme Court nomination hearings.
Yes.
With Clarence Thomas. We were just watching this. We were watching the treatment of Anita Hill. It became a divisive issue for the country. It led to the Year of the Woman politically, which was 1992. I'm this kind of nerd. But
I love it. I remember all of this. It was my senior year of college in 92. I'm a little older than you, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. This was this was being broadcast into our homes regularly for the first time. We weren't really watching a lot of congressional hearings before.
Yeah.
This was really mobilizing. And then assertiveness training for women had another surge, and then it died down again.
Yeah.
And, earlier in my career, for me, it was an underpinning, but it wasn't a conversation other people were wanting to have. But it's come back, and I'm excited about that. So I've started getting asked to do programs on this a few years ago, and then for me, it was always intricately interwoven with the work I was doing, but not everyone knew that. But I'm glad we're having a resurgence because, I mean, yes, women have come a long way and there are a lot of rights established that we didn't have, but a lot of them were under challenge.
Well, we had stuff taken away in the last year.
Yes. And we're losing ground. And what still is true is we're way too invested in politeness. You know,
yes.
We just are. And it's not that I'm all for treating humans well.
Right.
But the polite behavior is an expectation that falls way too heavily on women and minorities, people of color, LGBTQ individuals, where we tolerate so much rude, boorish, obnoxious behavior, especially among the older, white, cisgender, heterosexual men in our spaces. And so when we're sitting there frustrated, it's like, can you imagine if I acted like that? Well, it would be interpreted differently.
Oh,
right?
100%.
Very differently.
Absolutely.
So I want us to use politeness strategically, but not invest only in that as your value. Because if you go back to thinking when we're young, raising children, particularly young women, to be seen and not heard is setting them up for harm.
Absolutely.
Seen and not heard. And then parents are coming to me and wondering, how is sexual assault so prevalent? And they're imagining that we've taught resistance strategies. And I'm like, were you taught that? No. I had terrible, inadequate sex ed in junior high.
We all
just
did.
were trying to scare us. Yes, we all did. And they still do. So you can't expect
that hasn't changed much.
It hasn't changed. I ask the incoming students every year. No, it's terrifying. It's either none, then there is a religious focused abstinence only message. Then there is the scare tactic sex ed that I had in Indiana in the 90s, which was like zoomed in photos of STIs.
I can only imagine.
Oh, nothing really about how my body works or anybody else's body. Nothing about healthy relationships, dating, violence, consent. Nothing about boundaries, and certainly nothing about pleasure. Right?
Yes. Oh no. That was, that's evil, scary. You can't be trusted. Don't listen to your body. All of that. And I was well into adulthood before I knew as a woman I had an organ that was specifically designed for that. Didn't know.
I know. We could talk.
So that's a whole other. Yeah, and I have 3 daughters in their 20s, and I was still like, they're coming home from middle school, and I'm like, my God, this hasn't changed in 30 years.
It hasn't changed. It's so alarming. It's like they're getting a lot of information about sex. They have the internet. They have a lot of portrayals on TV and film, but they're not getting accurate information in a helpful way that desperately needs some boundary setting and discussions of consent. And we carry this throughout the rest of our lives, which means that I have a job and an office and that we're busy dealing with the effects of these things because we've never equipped them for this. So I do want us to rethink the way we raise children, all children. But
boys too.
Boys too, because everybody's got lessons to learn here.
Absolutely. And tell the boys it's okay to cry, for God's sakes. I mean,
I know.
There's so many things within it. Yes.
We can't just raise our daughters differently to do it all and not change how we are raising and our expectations of men. We're putting everyone in a bad spot. We're creating really problematic conditions for relationships. But what we want is a world where you get to be yourself, and it's what we want from our relationships with men. If you have a relationship with a man, is you want to be heard, you want to feel safe, you want your boundaries respected, you want it to be egalitarian. So how we're raising our children really, really matters. And that politeness piece, I think, is way overrated because we also need boundaries. So the angry girls, I'm much less worried about. Angry girl, it's not. I understand it's maybe tiring for the parent. But I'm less worried about them because they do have a sense of boundaries and a sense of their rights I'm not as concerned. Well, I'm much less concerned. I actually love to see it. An angry little girl, because they have a sense of entitlement to their body and their ideas and space. And that's great. That's good entitlement. That's what we want.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point, right?
Right.
Is that entitlement lets them get to anger quickly, and anger helps us assert boundaries, to feel entitled to do that, to have a sense of self-worth. When you've told them you're not important, you should be quiet, don't be disruptive, we don't want to hear you, that little girl has a very hard time telling someone that they shouldn't be touching them, shouldn't be saying these things, shouldn't be doing these things.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault they're being harmed. I'm not saying that in any way.
But they weren't given any tools.
Right. There are skills here that sometimes can help disrupt those things. Sometimes people are just wanting to violate our boundaries, and they're going to do it no matter how we resist. But we want them to be as equipped as possible, right, to have a safer experience.
Yeah.
The other thing you said that I think is very important to go back to, and I think you asked me about this earlier, and we're getting along so well, we're talking about all sorts of things, but is the importance of the collective action, right? It's not just about you. I'm not just talking about okay, we're going to prep the night before and you're going to negotiate your salary and then you got your raise. Good for you. And yes, you did. You've probably been underpaid. So I want you to get that, wage equality. But if you're not taking others with you, that's not changing the world. That's not changing the workplace. That's doing very little for others. So assertiveness is so much more than salary negotiation. That's one tiny piece of this is how are you going to bring up others with you? That means we're going to sit in the room and not dislike, not vote against, not avoid the assertive woman.
Right. And because a rising tide lifts us all. And rather than seeing that as a threat, okay, how can I invite her in with me? We're both coming at this. We both want the same things. How can we start seeing each other as each other's allies instead of each other's competitors? Somebody who's trying to steal your space. No, let's make space together. And because of the way we've been brought up, there's sometimes we don't come across it a very inviting way. And so it's the ability to see through that. I'm like, here, I see you, I hear you. Yes. And even though we might have a different way of approaching it, I think we can do this together, kind of thing. And that's not easy, but that's how we don't shift narratives until it's as a collective. There's more power with all of us. We just don't change cultures and shift narratives if we don't come in it together. And it comes with us all together, seeing each other as each other's partners and someone else who understands our experience. Because then more voices make more change. And as the more we see women showing up this way, the less pushback you're going to get because it becomes the way it is. Instead of being like, oh, watch out for her. It's like, oh, and for those that are like, why are this women else? Well, we're getting rid of these old myths and these lies and these stigmas, and we're starting to show up the way that we should be showing up all the time, always. But that's not what we've been told. But we're going to change that. And I think we're starting to see. I have 3 daughters in their 20s, and they're very much of that mindset. It's better together as a community. This is how we go about doing this. And it takes time. It's taken thousands of years to get us here. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's possible. But it's not possible one at a time. You're just
no, it's not. And they will. The system is set up to separate you, to slow down the change. You've got to find each other. That's why it takes the task force or the committee, or that's how people are getting things done. Other duties as assigned or not assigned, you got to choose them, right? So it's not probably the priority of your company. It may not be the priority of your romantic partner to make the relationship healthier for you, right? I mean, it's like you have to decide it's your priority. And in community settings, I mean, do you see how much women get done in the community, in just unofficial capacities? Of course, it takes us coming together. And there can be leaders. That's okay. But we're not going to sit across the table and shut out another woman. Right.
Yes.
What I want people to do is sit there and be like, why is she so angry? There's probably a reason. There's probably several reasons, and you can, where you have more space or you're comfortable. I've been working at this place for 10 years now, so I'm very comfortable. People know me, also know I have a reputation. I can, get away with some anger because of my job. Nobody really, if I chose my job, I love my job, but other people are like, how could you do your job?
Yeah.
So they'll let me be a little firm, but I also then have a lot of room to pause the meeting, say like, excuse me. I want to go back to Susan. Susan, you got interrupted. Would you like to, finish? Or when John takes credit for Susan's idea, I can be like, yes, John, I think that's what Susan was just saying. And I would, and I can do those things because now I'm older, I'm established, I've got room. I'm not like launching my career, and I can, one, get away with it because people expect it from me, but two, do it very effectively. I did go to law school. Law school teaches you lots of things. It was
negotiating tactics.
Negotiating tactics teaches you to interrupt. I'd probably have to work on that. But interrupting people, they're still in 2023, describe me as a woman lawyer, which I am, but there are lots of us, right? Woman lawyers. Yeah. So they think coming into the room. So I realized that coming into the room, people were anticipating a level of assertiveness that I didn't used to have, actually. I loved the reading and writing part of law school. I didn't want to do mock trial or be a litigator. I'm not doing that now. But I learned that, okay, they're expecting a certain thing that gives me room to engage and grow into that. And then my job does too. So you find the spaces where people are going to expect you to participate. They've chosen to hire you. They've put you on the committee. They've chosen you as their life partner. Whatever it is, you've been chosen. You have a right to be there and to engage. And we desperately need your input and your ideas. And we need them to be different than the other, similar bodies at that one end of the table.
Right.
We need you to stop taking the secretarial duties and serving the coffee if that's not your job. Otherwise, they will always expect the woman to do that.
Yes.
We need you to take a seat at the table when you belong there and not at the back of the room where you're just think of all the ways you're disempowering yourself, which you think are being nice or polite or considerate,
Yes.
It's probably countless throughout the day. And I'm not talking about not being nice to people.
Right.
Going to be nice to people. If you want to give up your seat on the subway to someone, to the pregnant woman or yes, of course, please keep doing those things. It's not aggression. It's not claw our way to the top and elbow everybody else out. It's just, I have a right to be here. I have ideas. I have input. I'm going to show up, share those directly. It's very efficient, actually, clearly, and respect the rights and needs of others. That's assertiveness. That's not aggressiveness. That's not passivity or passive aggressiveness. That's what it means, is to show up. And it's just about being fair and taking up space which you deserve.
Yes.
Articulating your wants and needs which you deserve, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Not trampling the rights of others.
Right.
But I need us, so women need to let other women engage assertively, maybe even aggressively. It depends on the team dynamics, right? If there's a bunch of bad behavior, I'm not going to say I'm never aggressive. Sometimes I am aggressive.
Yeah. And you got to know when that's necessary.
Yeah. Right. Hopefully sparingly, but sometimes I do match bad behavior with bad behavior because I have room to do so safely, given my job. They know that I have this high pressure and emotionally taxing job, right? So I've got some space to be emotional that not everyone is afforded, actually, but I still try to really use that sparingly only when necessary, given the other bad behavior in the room. I'm not then going to turn around and use it and display that bad behavior with my team that I supervise, right? So just because I have gotten myself in, I think this is where the 80s power woman, went awry.
Yes.
Now I'm going to behave as badly as any of the men who came before me.
Yes. Yes.
That's what we can't do. That's a mistake.
Yes.
And it doesn't feel rewarding.
No, I'm interrupting you. I'm so sorry, but I'm so excited about that because that's my biggest thing. We don't need you to show up like the men show up. We need you to show up as you, as a woman, with your strengths, with your feedback, with your knowledge. Yes. And I think that's the key is you don't know. We're not going to continue bad behavior and just model in a woman. Show up as you. That's what we need.
Right. I mean, we have so many strengths and there's so many studies on this. I mean, it has been studied and it has been proven, right?
Yes.
That like women who lead, who have the space actually to show up as themselves and be heard and be effective have remarkable performance in even traditionally male-dominated fields. So, I mean, I have all this research. Anyone who wants it, please, I will send it your way. But we need room for a different model of leadership. And, I think we've been taught, so many of us have been taught the male military model. Like we spend so much time on that in school. Yeah. I'm not saying there's not courage and heroism, and remarkable lessons to be learned in that. But that's not the only model there is. That's not
right. And that's for the military on the battlefield.
Military. That's not for the family. That's not for the community. That's not for many, many of our jobs. We've got to let go of that. That's not the approach that we need that's solving many of the world's problems. It's causing a lot of problems. It's causing a lot of stress and dissatisfaction in the workplaces. And that's when those are the only stories that we're telling our children, and those are the only messages and movies that get shown to everyone, then that is carrying over a lot longer than it is effective. That's not, following orders can be very useful, but that's not the only model of courage I see. I mean, the single mom who's fighting really hard to take care of her kid when the world is telling her all of the other ways. I mean, I see courage in that,
Absolutely.
And that's against all odds. Mm-hmm. Right. And so look for those stories too, and prioritize, taking your kids to see different movies. Everyone can go see the Barbie movie. It's not just for girls.
Absolutely. There's a lot of lessons in that. Yes.
Yes. We don't need to just watch people blow things up and explode things and fight physically, and I'm for all sorts of enjoy your problematic faves, but you got to know the problematic. We got to mix up the messages, right? So because we're just still trying to replicate these things in really harmful ways. So if women are showing up aggressively in the workplace, there's probably a reason why. So cut them a little slack. But when women are showing up assertively in the workplace, support them in whatever way you can, because they are probably accomplishing things that are benefiting all the rest of us.
And don't mistitle them as aggressive, because if their assertiveness makes you uncomfortable, that doesn't mean it's aggressive. That's telling you that you've got some of your own work to do.
Right. I mean, really go back to, am I bothered if, a similarly situated man acts the same way? You are probably not. We are letting them be so rude, so often, so controlling in so many spaces. And that is not fair. That's not equity. That's not equality. That's not egalitarian. That's not, many, many things. We are entitled to be in these spaces. We are entitled to be safe. We are entitled to be heard. Mm-hmm. We have to be assertive because we are being denied that space and time and
those basic rights. These
are basic things. These are basic things. Absolutely. These are foundational things. So, when I hear people say that like young women are entitled today, I hope so. I hope they are entitled, right? I hope they feel entitled to be there, entitled to speak up, entitled to have their boundaries respected, to be, taking a bite out of life, because why not? Right?
Yeah.
It's not just for certain people. It's for all of us. Like anything else, like the anger, like the aggression, it can go too far.
Sure.
But a lot of it is a really good sign, and it tells me that they're going to have really great boundaries that are a buffer and that are self-protective factors that are going to guard against so many of the issues that we don't want for our children.
Right. And they're going to have no problem taking up space. And my thing to that is, I think it's more open to white women than women of color.
Yes.
And our LGBTQIA plus sisters. So bring them with you. Bring
Absolutely.
them with you. Because we've got to get rid of this angry Black woman model. Those women are making moves. Those women are showing up and changing narratives. So when you find that you're in that space, bring them with you. Give them a platform. Help. Because again, all together rising up. But if using that opportunity.
It's so true. And my friends and I know it. There are spaces I can go in and speak up and be assertive and be heard. One, I'm invited more often, right?
Sure.
Like among women, my anger is tolerated and I have access to space. So that privilege is real. And if you want to talk about what's selfish, the selfish part is just asserting yourself for yourself and not bringing other people with you.
Exactly.
Right? You're being aggressive because you have space to do that. And other people don't. In certain situations, you can be really strategic around that. But absolutely, where I have had space, is also realizing that once you've learned how to be assertive, once you've gained some of that access and that skill, is sharing the mic. Yeah. I don't actually have to be the one who talks all of the time. I'm actually tired by talking all of the time. Right?
Your introvert self is like, I got a time limit here.
It doesn't mean I have to and when you learn it, you might need to die. Like once it feels good too, because you're like,
it's very empowering,
effective. But then you have to learn that this doesn't need to be me. I don't need all of the opportunities. I don't actually need to be on all of the committees. I don't need to be at the table. If I am at the table, I can create space for the person here. I can agree with them. Actually, even when it's something I don't care about, right? You can lend your support when they're not being heard, not being included, really care passionately about something, really frustrated. This is a buddy system. So, I definitely do try to do that. As I mentioned earlier, you can call out the interruptions, but you can also amplify, invite people with you and be like, I brought Crystal with me to talk about this because I know how important this is. And she has an experience that I think the rest of us aren't really having. And I can just create the invitation. So where I have fought to myself to get in, now I have access. You have to bring other people with you. You have to acknowledge the inequities and those realities. We know they're there. I don't want you just wringing your hands. I don't want you just posting something not too offensive on social media and calling it a day. Now that is so frustrating for me. It's like you cannot just assert yourself to benefit you and your family. You have to understand when other women are asserting themselves to benefit them and their families, and maybe they aren't showing up the way that you would, but maybe they have a lot of frustrations or decades or years or centuries of disregard that are feeling that anger. And we need a lot more understanding about that.
Yeah, and empathy and hearing the story. Like, let's tell me your story of how you got here, because then you start seeing each other as human. You start relating experiences. It builds bridges. And then you can create let's take that and let's use that for us.
Yes, there are heartbreaking stories behind it, right?
Gosh, yes.
And if they're showing up differently than you, there's probably a reason why. Right? Yeah. If they're louder, if they're more aggressive, it's probably because they've been shut out and not heard, and they're tired of it, and rightfully so. And so that's where I'm like, we've had, and it's been white women, and a lot of older white women, some Gen X, the boomers go back to this politeness when they're looking at the many problems plaguing the world right now. And I'm like, the politeness isn't getting it done. The politeness isn't protecting their children. The politeness isn't reducing sexual harassment. Yes, I mean, like, if you don't feel a need to be protesting in the streets, be thankful you don't feel the need to do that. Right?
Absolutely.
These people don't have other things they want to do that day. Right?
Yeah.
That's the level of desperation and activism that's being called upon to be heard and to create change. Right? If you get it, that's privilege.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. It's like, oh, boom, mic drop. I love that so much. Okay. Yes. So good. We could talk all day, but I'm going to keep us on track here. The importance of coming back to your why and your values. And what you say yes and no to. You spoke to this beautifully earlier when you were talking about your self-care routine, that need to know where your space was, that to be able to be by yourself, that you weren't always going to engage at the party or the thing because you knew it was going to deplete you. I'm sure this has to come into play too when you're deciding what it is you care about, because in your position, you're probably being asked all the time. So where do your why and your values play into that, and what you say yes and no to, and what you allow into your space?
Yeah. I mean, I still do have a boss, and so sometimes they're setting my agenda for me. Sometimes I have an 8 a.m. meeting, which, that I get myself up and I go to. So you do have to acknowledge the rigidity and the flexibility in your calendar. Some days I just have to power through, and I don't schedule a happy hour or an evening thing. Or if I do, then it's the next day. If it's a tough week, be vigilant about guarding your weekend. It's hard for me to rest. I am defining even like Sunday, where lousy weather, it's winter. I am proud of myself for how little I did on Sunday because it's still hard to to think I don't need to. I love routine. There's so much discipline in it. There is, but I gave myself a lot of permission to do things that aren't productive, on Sunday. They are still productive. You're refueling. So if you still need to, if you can't let it go, that's fine. Just view it as recharging and refueling. But it's a simple lesson. It's not a magic solution, but the guarding the calendar is key for me. So if I have the 8 a.m. meeting and I know that I have to really go fake that, like that feels like more effort for me, and I'm able to create a half-hour break between that and the next meeting, I do that, right? Or that means that and my staff, they know this too, because I'll be like, I need to have lunch by myself at my desk. And I have that quiet lunch by myself at my desk. Sometimes I'll open Netflix and just watch something and just maybe it's a 15 or 20 minute break. It's still a break, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not like eating and trying to respond to emails and taking another bite. If I can help it, I'm really trying to take a break. The beautiful campus, taking a walk has actually been key. You're getting some activity, but for me, it's like a mental break. And I walk past these pretty little sitting areas all the time. And a few years ago, I was like, I can go sit there, And also I can work on my phone, so I can go sit there and respond to emails on my phone if I need to, if you need to work, and whatever little thing you can do, little gift to yourself throughout the day. If it's just an afternoon snack, I'm going to, sometimes I just walk with a friend to their meeting and then I walk back. Right. And so if they're having a busy week, we see each other, we catch up, we give each other a hug. That's nice. That's like a, it's affection. And then we go back to the meeting. And so, it's a decision to not let, for me, it was work, but for not, it can be a relationship. It can be whatever it is. Squeeze every bit of energy and joy out of you. You have to be deliberate about putting it back in. The work is always going to be there. There's always more work tomorrow. You can say, I've done enough, right? And when assertiveness is your daily practice, you actually can rest more easily, because I do know I showed up and I tried. So I can sleep,
Yeah.
I'm not chewing on something. I'll get up and make a list if I need to of what I'm going to tackle tomorrow. But mostly I am not spending time thinking of what I wish I would have said or what I should have done or wondering if I tried hard enough, because I am. Because I'm showing up and I'm engaging. Like, I'm supposed to be here. My job is this. My task is this. I was strategic as I knew how to be. And that brings a lot of peace. And that diffuses the anger. And that, depletes the resentment. That's the kind of depletion we want, right? Like, so I'm not sitting there angry and resentful because I tried. I tried as hard as I could today. I'm going to start again tomorrow. Those are the keys for me. I mean, sometimes I eat junk food and then I balance it out the next day with eating a healthy meal, So it's like really self-compassion or cutting yourself some slack is surviving the day so that you can thrive tomorrow. But it can't be, I'm barely surviving every day, right? If that's how it feels, your body's sending you messages, you got to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so key. And listen to it.
Listen to your body.
Listen to it. Yeah, absolutely. And would you say kind of in your relationships in terms of I think that would be really for the kind of work you do, then being able to show up in your relationships the way you want to, making sure you're not depleted. Talk to me about that piece too.
That's been really hard. So I do love my job and it's kind of a calling. And if I don't have guards put in place, it can take over, Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people who do any type of social work job or have a cause job are at risk for it burning you out and really taking a toll on your personal your health, your relationships, everything. And so it's a lesson a lot of us learn the hard way. And you see the poster in many offices.
Me too.
You can't pour. You can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Yes,
it's just so true. The sayings are true. We have got to acknowledge the sayings are true. They're true for us. They're not just messages we're telling other people. We have got to hear them. So there were years, though. There were years where I probably was not very present or pleasant in a relationship. Now, I did have a very understanding partner. He too was a workaholic, so we both kind of just worked all of the time. And we did hang out on weekends. And so that's another reason, mm-hmm. I wasn't going to brunch with my friends on weekends because I saw them at work, right? So I saw them throughout the week. We had the hour at work. It's not that I wasn't allowed to. So, I'm very assertive in my relationships. But it was a choice to be with my also then introverted partner where we were spending time together on the weekends. And that worked out fine for us. It may not be fine with your partner. They might need you to show up more throughout the week. You're going to have to talk about wants and needs and compromise where necessary and make an effort. I'm going back to the happy hours with friends. That's not as frivolous as it sounds. That actually helped my relationship with my partner because we would do it at the end of the workday, vent for an hour maybe, then go home. Then I didn't need to unload on my partner because I commiserated with people who really actually better understood who I was talking about, why I was frustrating, because they're sharing many of the same frustrations, or at least they know their players. And it wasn't just to listen to me explode at home. If you have a good listener, if you don't have a good listener, then it was a way to not act out in other ways. Or nobody unloaded the dishwasher and I've lost it because I'm not really mad about the dishwasher. At the end of the day, it's I love my partner. Oh my gosh, who cares if they don't I'll just move the bowl. These things are not worth the big fight. And actually that's a real sign that you're not taking care of your other frustrations and other needs. If that's the fight. Now, if they never do something, that's a different conversation. Exactly. It's a different conversation where assertiveness can be your friend. But if that's happening in your relationship, that's also a sign that you're probably not taking care of it. Right. Yeah. So the massage, the quiet time, those things were important to build in, but you're talking to your partner and you're explaining why you need them. And if you're in a healthy relationship, then your partner understands, like mine did understand why I needed to do the job, why the first few years were so taxing. I was building a new program. And you make compromises and decisions, and they do either support that or they don't. They have a right not to. That's the hard part for people to understand. It's like,
that's a very good point.
Your boundaries. You get to articulate your wants and needs. This other human gets to decide whether or not they can agree with that.
Yeah.
And maybe they should, but we can't control them. And they have their own wants and needs. And we're going to come up against that. And you have to decide ultimately what's worth it for you. And that's tough. And sometimes that's heartbreaking, but we can't change other people who aren't willing to do the work. Right. And so that's where the boundary piece is key. It's like, yes, you can set your own, but they have the right to set theirs. You know?
Yes. And then you got to figure out from there where that goes. What does that mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it can be tough. I'm big on communication. And if you're on your assertiveness journey, it will be helpful to communicate that to your partner in some way. Like they will want to know where the changes are coming from and why they're important to you. So preparation, talking points, notes, whatever you need. Workbooks, there's tons of exercises. There's some free exercises on my website, but there's lots of them available once you start looking for them. That prep work is key. You can do that prep work on your own before you begin communicating out. But with partners in romantic and sexual relationships, there's no way to do that effectively and get what you want and need without communication.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much. I love how you talked about both sides of the relationship there. That's so important to remember. And that can be hard, but it's true. That's what you're going to be up against. And we need to be, cognizant of that. Living out of your own expectations versus others. That's got to be, I'm just going back to say this earlier. People don't expect people in your position to show up and not be an extrovert. We have just decided in society. So, but also just going back to how you were raised and all those things. Talk to me about your expectations journey and getting to a space of being comfortable living out of your own versus others.
That was really hard. It really was. Yeah. So I think a lot of us are raised to perform and to please others, and I think I did that. And I checked all of the boxes, and probably, I got good grades. I got a college degree. I went to law school. I got a law degree. I got a job, married a classmate, and had all of these things that are supposed to be indicators of success. And neither of us were really very happy, and I think that like late 20s period is a lot harder than people tell you it's going to be.
Yeah.
Or getting married, it's considered young now, but I was, I graduated from law school and had gotten our professional jobs. We got married at like 25. The 25 to 30 age range is hard. You're not powerful yet. You don't. You're still growing up and figuring out who you want to be. There's such an expectation to be successful, but you're in lower ranked, like junior level positions at work. So it's like you're not going to be the CEO yet, right?
Right.
And so I felt like I didn't really get any messages or good preparation for that, right? Of how to navigate that phase. And it's really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I always study things then, and I'm trying to figure out, is this my experience or is this a shared experience? And actually there's a lot of shared experience there.
Yeah.
And that's really hard, right? It's hard when two people are dissatisfied at work or two people are feeling the strain of things and trying to figure out who you're going to be when you grow up while they're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think I did at first try to take care of my partner. Like I saw his frustration and ultimately his depression. And then I was like, I thought I'll just try to do everything in the relationship. I was like, I'll move the yard. I'll do all, and when that didn't work either, I was very frustrated, right? I was very frustrated. I finally, for myself, was like, I can't keep living like this, right?
No.
It's not working. Like I tried the taking care of you part. And for me, my version of that story is that they weren't doing the work that they needed to do on themselves or for the relationship. And I was giving too much.
Yeah.
but I had to stop, right? I was like, my career's not going where I want. The personal relationship's not going where I want. I am not happy. I am not healthy. And it was a tough phase. I mean, it was tough to say that, but nobody else was going to change it for me.
Right.
No one else. It was like, I was like, my family was states away. My job was over here, that no one else is going to save you. Right. So it's like I had to do it. Now, I mean, at that point, I felt very unhappy. I was suffocating, in the relationship, and drew that line, and we separated. I mean, this is just the reality, right? So we separated, and this was a really tough phase. It wasn't a particularly happy phase, but it was a crucial phase in restructuring my life, and rebuilding the relationship too. I mean, I wish it hadn't gone to that, but sometimes people don't understand how serious you are until you're like, no, I'm serious.
This is a non-negotiable. Yeah.
This is a non-negotiable. I'm leaving. Again, here's my boundaries. You get to live your boundaries, but like I had to make a change, and that was really tough. And that took a while for the other person to understand that this is what I need in the relationship. This is what I'm willing to accept. But it does take risk. I wasn't sure where my life was going to go then. I thought it was all taken care of and wrapped up in a nice little box with a bow, but I was looking at the rest of it and being like, is this all there is? Is this who I'm going to be? And I was in a really hypocritical space too, because I was like, I believed all of this, right? My life had been structured like this. So I was like, I'm going to work every day and giving messages to the world that I believe in, but I'm not living. And you eventually going to have to reconcile with this, right? Like your relationships cannot thrive, your health won't, so one way or another, healthy coping mechanisms or not, right? Like something is going to give. So I did just say, like, this is how it's going to be, and have to go out on my own. I've done that again recently. I think that because he and I did get back together, and we had some really, really good time in there. But how much of myself am I willing to compromise or shut off for this one life that we're giving? And I had to make a change for that. But it didn't feel brave to me at the time to go through it, but I am struck by how many women like around our age have said that to me. They were like, you're so brave. And I'm like, well, I feel sad and I feel heartbroken, but it felt necessary. It felt necessary. And of course, I feel better now, and everything does get better with time. But it is so worth it to live like authentically as you are, to be who you are, to have the space to breathe, to put that out into the world. You also get so much back. I am better at my job. And I love my job. Now, some people don't. For some people, a job is a job, and it's not a calling, and it's not your top priority. But I can't live with myself if I'm not being who I am and being effective at that. And it's just not what I believe in. And I know that I'm worth it, honestly, to have something else. And that's been, I had to be assertive in those really tough conversations at the end of that relationship, but it was the right thing to do, because what's the alternative? Yeah. Living with being miserable for the rest of your life.
And so many people choose that because they don't. So many people choose that. And I think, something that's really important, and that you said this earlier, we are sold a package. And I'm a little older than you, but we're the same generation. We are sold a package, and we believe the package. We don't stop to think about our own expectations within that. We don't stop to think about, but what do I care about within this? And does it match up with this? And the difference I see in my daughter's generation is they stop. They does this match up with what it is I care about, what it is I'm passionate about? And I believe a lot of that is driven, like they saw what we did, and they're like, wait, there's a better way to do this. There's a different way to do this. And I'm so thankful for that, because my husband and I have been together over 30 years, but we've had some bumpy times. We've had to have some hard conversations where we didn't know on the other side of it what the result was going to be, but we came to a point where it had to be said and it had to be hashed out. We couldn't continue down the trajectory we were on because we bought into that early, package. And so I mean, I think it's really important that, from the outset, you're like, it's okay for me to have expectations that are mine. It's okay if it doesn't meet somebody else's, because you'll know, your body will tell you, your inner knowing, you will feel the angst if you are not in alignment. And
Absolutely.
So thank you for your vulnerability in sharing that, because that's tough. But I think it's really something we have to start looking at. And it's not too late to start asking those questions. I don't care if you're 30 or 80.
No,
start asking those questions. It's never too late. As long as you're breathing, it's never too late to do that and know that you're worthy of that. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, I mean, you're very welcome. There's no separation really, right? I mean, we've drawn these fake lines between like personal and it's business. I mean, I don't even like to talk about that in business. All business is personal. There is nothing that's not personal. These are persons. They're humans.
Yes.
And where it's settled for women, I mean, I've seen this quote a number of times, but it feels really true, is that you can't have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. Right.
Yeah.
And we also don't ask men that question. I mean, like these things are so annoying. But I'm glad your daughters and like younger people have seen us and they'll be like, okay, there's my mom having it all. And she doesn't seem happy either,
Yeah.
And having it all doesn't seem like it's being carried.
What's having it all mean?
Oh my gosh, I know. What is it all, And I don't care if you're 80. I love to see those stories. You can tell like somebody's had it. These stories where she's like, people are like, what? People acted that way about me too. Like too old to make a change. I have many, many years of my life ahead of me.
Absolutely. And we can always be learning.
Yes, I want to be learning and growing and changing and contributing, and taking care of the people, around me. And I'm trying to create conditions where I can do that.
Yeah.
And change was necessary. Sometimes the change doesn't have to be that drastic. The solutions are the same. You've got to assert yourself, show up, have those tough conversations, try to create the change for good where you can, do what you can where you are with what you've got, right? That's all we can do.
Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves, which I think is just all that we've been talking about, is accepting all those choices, all those parts, all those things. We don't have to like everything, but acknowledging, that was a choice. That was a decision we made. We learned X from this, but we just want to talk about the shiny parts. So talk to me about your layers journey, because I mean, we've really been talking about it, but if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where we've gone, right? Is that the personal and professional are the same person.
Mm-hmm.
There are many layers. There's my introvert layer. There's my extrovert performance. I love a social activity and love to have fun, just not all day, all of the time. Right. I love a public speaking engagement. I love to talk from a podium. Mingling, networking, I do not. Those things are incredibly draining. I've learned to allow myself these many layers and different aspects of my personality. And some of them are quirks and some of them are like hardwired. And you have to have space for all of them. You have to have time for all of them. You have to treat them sometimes gingerly, there's no sense denying the parts of yourself. They're going to come out in unhealthy ways. It's going to be tension in the body. It's going to be evident in the face. It's going to be too hard of a line when you're giving a speech. People are going to see it and feel it if you are not acknowledging it. Again, you can't expect other people to prioritize these things for you or to create space for them. You have got to create space for them yourselves. Yeah. You've got to learn to love yourself. I know these messages are out there and it's really hard until you prioritize it and try to do it. And then you understand what they've been saying. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of women our age thought we still got messages where you were like going to get this kind of love from a partner. And that human being can only do so much for themselves too. They are still having a day with anxieties and frustrations and physical ailments or not, they're still having their own host of expectations and pressures put on them. They might care very deeply for you. They might prioritize you, but they cannot read your mind.
Yeah.
And the romance messages we get where you meet this partner and it's just magic. I mean, please think of those stories. Many of them end with the wedding. They don't tell you the rest of the journey.
After that. Just be the beginning. No kidding.
Right. Like a few movies do, and those angsty dramas get Oscars at the end of the year, but most of them are selling us this like light and airy message that like you're just going to meet and it's going to work out. And then we discover a reality and a structure that we've put in place in our lives that can make all of that really difficult.
Yeah.
So layers requires like a deliberate choice on my part to create space for myself. I mean, a few years ago, that was like, I don't have to be so serious all the time. I'm going to create more space for fun. And it was like a friend who was really key about that. So I've started to do a lot more things that I used to enjoy. I enjoy roller skating. Now, it is risky. I am not nearly as good as I used to be, but it's fun. It's actually great exercise.
It is.
This way where I'm tricking myself into exercising, but it serves no work-related purpose. At first glance, but it brings joy to my life. I need joy. I need joy to offset the vicarious trauma that the job can bring.
Right.
We need laughter. Years ago, people were doing the adult coloring books. That's fine. Do those. Why not? Why not do those? Right. It's just. It's the messages are so constant and sometimes vicious about what's a good use of our time, but we don't exist just to make money or make money for other people.
Yes.
You can create, you can have fun. These are self-care activities. Also,
yes, they are.
And so I just learned to do that. So there's many layers. There's many layers. There's many versions of self. So sometimes I'm like, I'm going to wear my red jacket today and do the straight hair. And then sometimes I'm softer. So like you just play with it too. Like I'm allowed to do both.
In summary, in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, talk to me about, which you have done, your journey is evident in that. So just talk to me about how that's affected you, your relationship with yourself, as well as your relationship with others.
I mean, everything is so much easier, actually. Once you commit to this. I mean, for me, it was committing to assertiveness. I finally became the woman I wanted to be. I finally became effective and persuasive and influential when you've tackled that fear. I wanted to be good at public speaking when I was younger, but I was afraid, I wanted to be, I was girl powery, but then I was like, no, now I'm a force of nature, but it requires some work. I was not in any way born this way. A lot of young girls, first year students, they'll see me speak. I speak like an orientation and stuff. They say nice things now. I mean, it's cute. It's changed over time because now, one year this girl was like, "Wish you were my mom." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm now their mom."
Sharp reality check. You're like, "Oh, wow, now I'm their mom."
I was like, "No, thank you." And it's their mom has many qualities I don't have, but what they saw was like an unapologetic woman saying, your boundaries are worthwhile. And they heard that. And so it was a huge compliment to me. It's just one of those things where you're like, oh, I realized. And I love it. I actually love being 46. I think your 40s are better than your 30s, are better than your 20s. Everybody's been lying to you about all of these things, but it's only true if you can show up authentically, right? I know it doesn't feel true for everyone because they're still trying to please someone else. They're trying to be someone other than who they are. So there's nothing better. There's nothing better than waking up every day and I get to do what I want. I get to wear what I want. I get to I have agency. I have some authority. I have freedom, if you like nice things, there's nothing better than buying them for yourself. then there are no strings attached, like, so it's kind of, whatever your framework is, the satisfaction you get from carving out space for you to do it yourself and be who you are is work worth doing. It's so worthwhile. It also makes everything else easier. Yeah. It makes sitting through a totally obnoxious meeting easier because I get to be myself later. It makes sleep, which I struggled with for years, less of a chore and more of an enjoyable activity because I'm not only having that space to myself at the end of the day to that kind of like introvert retreat time. That's not the only time that's mine. I built it in elsewhere. Home is not the only space where I get to be me. I get to be me elsewhere. I don't get to be me all of the time. Sure. Who does? But it was a dramatic shift of my approach and my calendar and all of that, where I was like, I was doing everything for them. I was being this fake person that performed very well out there and then was like trying to be me in these stolen moments. It was a shift, and it takes time to build that. Mm-hmm. It's so deeply satisfying and easier. Yeah. Right. So everything's better. Everything's better. I love how you frame it. I love what FEEL stands for, because that's a wonderful way to capture it. And then it does put you on the journey to get the life that you want.
It does. And that's why we do it. And that's why we came up with these talking points. And this is from my own lived experience and people around me, people that are close to me. I'm like, no, this is a formula but you got to be willing to do the work. You got to be willing to sit in it and recognize those areas that need to be attended to. It's not just here's your quick list, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And it's going to change over time in seasons. And you talked about how it's, now that you're showing up this way, how much easier it is. It makes you better in relationships too. It takes the pressure off the relationships to meet needs that they were never designed to meet.
Right. Yeah, that is so true.
We are down to our rapid fire. Okay. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
So hanging out with my dog, number 1. Okay. Brings me so much joy. It makes me laugh every day. I play the piano, and I did not enjoy that as a child when I was being forced to, but I have reclaimed it as an adult, and now it's really good, like introvert time for me. I do enjoy time outside. That doesn't really matter if I'm just sitting outside or gardening, but I do garden a little bit now. And I find that that's really restorative. I love a happy hour with my friends. It serves many functions, but it's also fun. Except for 5th one, I would say like music and dancing. As strategy, I have a really uplifting like playlist that I play almost every single day on my way to work. Tina Turner's great for this. Better Be Good to Me is a personal favorite anthem, But it just puts you in that frame of mind. So music really helps me do lots of things, brings me joy.
Love that. That's so good. That mindset, that set to start your day. I love that. It's so good. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
I want to feel content. I want to feel influential. I want to feel engaged professionally. I've been doing it for a while, so it requires a little bit more work to still feel interested and exciting. I could just run on autopilot. I don't like to do that, so I'm like trying to recultivate that. Joy, I want more joy, and I want to feel hungry for
I like that.
Yeah. New experiences.
Awesome. Oh, Cara, I obviously we went a long time. I could talk to you all day. I just love what you have to say. So many great nuggets in things that for women to take away from this. This is so empowering. It was so informative. I appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, and sharing your journey. Don't worry, ladies. These resources will be available on embracinglayers.com on our sources page. So you can go there and find all of this. You probably want to go back and listen to this a couple times and take some notes And if any of these things are making you feel a little uneasy, that's a clue. That's a clue that maybe it's something you need to dive into and get into. Remember, those things are here to help us, to inform us on what it is that needs to have some attention. But Cara, thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Ladies, let this week be empowering in yourself. Have that confidence. It's okay to be assertive. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be heard. Take those things, take that anger within you that's inspiring you to move the needle on something and put it into practice, and don't apologize for doing so. And have a great week.